I've started the recording, so December meeting, FAC 2023. Let's get started. So approval of the minutes, we're going to defer till next meeting. They exist. Thank you, Lois. They weren't shared. No, thank you to me. And approval of the agenda. I know that, oh, is Brendan here?
Brendan is going to be joining us, so
Okay.
that'll be the third university, but he's in his car somewhere.
Okay.
And so he's
So
asked
that's why
to
he asked for
include-
later in the meeting.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we should include him as virtually present somewhere in the ether. And he's asked for an agenda item on the auditor's reports
Right.
after about 2 o'clock.
Okay. Let's just slip that in between old and new business. So with that modification, is there a motion to approve that agenda? Yeah,
So moved.
right, a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay. All right, reports of the chair and vice chair. Do you want to start, Dave? Actually, it makes more sense for you to go second so that you can go straight into the proposed resolution.
Okay.
I would say that ASA, the thing of significance, I guess, to all of us on the agenda, there were, modifications, discontinuations, etc. But there is a new College of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences at Central that was approved at the last ASA, which I suppose will make it to our next BOR meeting. So that is of note. And then community colleges, maybe we'll come back to that at some point. I will just say that CPOS continues to be a point of concern. There are many points of concern, but CPOS continues to be a point of concern for various reasons, and not only the one that caused us to refer it to the ASA committee. So I'm hoping that we'll, have some further communication about that soon.
What is the new problem?
The new problem is that we're noticing that students who transfer in credits, so your CPOS restricts federal financial aid only to courses that are applied to your program. But if you transfer in credits, even credits that you didn't use financial aid for anywhere, like AP International, CLEP, that sort of thing, right? Exams in lieu of, etc. Those get counted as if they are courses you've already used financial aid for, and reduces your eligibility for financial aid at the community college level. So for students who are going to transfer to a university, it makes their degrees more expensive. It prevents them from moving on as a rising junior, etc. Doesn't seem that this is intentional, or at least we haven't confirmed that it is. I don't think it would be. But we haven't really gotten a resolution. I know that there have been recommendations from faculty to maybe, well, one in particular, to perhaps maybe just don't apply these credits until we figure out how to exclude them, or, so that we know until students are actually transferring or graduating or making their decisions about what's next, and then you figure out how the credits best serve them so that they get full access to the financial aid to which they're eligible. So that's kind of what we're hearing. And there's been conversation outside of our system about this, which is why I feel perfectly comfortable talking about it here. But it's not clear what the resolution will be. So, yeah. Okay. Want to go ahead, David?
Okay, Finance Committee, never a lot of fun. So obviously they presented what they call a resolution to increase tuition and fees, an average of 3% at the community college and an average of 5% at the universities, along with some miscellaneous institution-specific fees, which are under the category of miscellaneous. But I think we need to focus on the basic across-the-board tuition and a general fee increase. So I sent around a copy of the resolution. Let me see if I can just quickly find it here so that I can display it. This is going to require me just 1 second while I get into sharing and find it. Are you seeing the resolution concerning blah, blah, blah?
For me or for her?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of whereases, which, you know, are
Michelle?
perfunctory. Hang on a second. I'm sorry. I've lost something here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so
Can hear you.
so the whole thing is rather perfunctory, except in the second to last, the last whereas, which says this is part of the mitigation efforts, right? And the resolve says that the BOR approves the FY 25 tuition and mandatory fee increases and scheduled as presented in the attached staff report and attachments. So we're talking about something like 45 pages, right? And I note here that the essential of what they're doing, which is the 3% in the community colleges and 5% at the universities, is never mentioned in the resolution explicitly. It then goes on to say that the BOR, sorry, this is death by computer. That the BOR grants the CSU Chancellor the authority to make any necessary adjustments to the FY 25 tuition fee rates and schedules as approved herein, provided that such adjustments shall not significantly increase the overall cost of tuition. There's no definition of significant increase. Ensuring that the overall financial burden to students remains limited, and of course there's no definition of limited. Any such adjustments shall be promptly reported to the BOR Finance and Infrastructure Committee for review, right? And then it says that the approved tuition and mandatory fee increases may be increased or may be revised or reconsidered by the BOR as the BOR deems appropriate, right? So it's not clear to me, and I suppose, you know, somebody, a legal expert would have to say whether this requires adjustments made by the Chancellor to go to the BOR, or whether if the BOR doesn't think it appropriate, they don't need to go. But in any case, there are significant difficulties with this, and I would mention just 4 of them. And if I can find my document here, I will get it on as well. Well, let me just summarize it. It's here. So here they are. And again, sorry for the clumsiness of my I'm going to stop this. Now I'm going to share another. And I have no idea whether I'm sharing the correct thing, but anyways, let me just read it out. The resolution, these are just procedural problems. The resolution does not explicitly state the percentage increases for tuition and fees, but only refers back to a multi-page staff report, which normally would not be archived with the resolution in the state repository or be readily available to interested parties. So it sort of, put it bluntly, hides the percentage increase. Right. 2, the resolution does not respond, and I think this is the most important part, to repeated requests to research the effect of a 3% or 5% tuition and fee increase on student enrollment, specifically recruitment and retention. That was asked for the last 2 times. There were increases to tuition and fee, and the system leadership are well aware of that request, not only made by me, but also made by other members of the board. And of course, that's not in all the many pages of the staff report. It's simply not there. When I brought this up at the board meeting, the response from Lloyd Blanchard, who otherwise presented a series of PowerPoints, which I don't have here because they're not yet posted, which were somewhat better than the explanation in the staff report, but nonetheless also did not deal with the resilience of students relative to a 3 to 5% increase. And his response to me was, well, that varies from person to person, and we'd have to ask each and every student whether it makes a difference on them. I found that a little silly, especially coming from someone who is an economist or has an economic background. So that obviously studies must have been done on this, and the fact that it's not there is really a major delinquency in this resolution. And what I mentioned, the resolution leaves open a vaguely formulated possibility of further adjusting a tuition and fees at the discretion of the chancellor with no explicit statement of constraints other than limited or not significantly increased, and a report to the board, which is authorized to revise and reconsider any increases if it so desires. That again is extremely vague. And let me add a fourth point, which is this is now presented as part of the mitigation measures. But if you look at the mitigation measures, and I'm going to stop this and make one last effort here to show you the right thing because I spent some time doing this. You see something like a sort of like a spreadsheet with red boxes all over it?
Mhm.
All
Yes.
right. So this was the deficit mitigation plan that was basically approved at the last board meeting, the special meeting in November. This is the so-called comprehensive summary, right? And if you notice here, you have the CT state deficit, which is $33.6 million in FY24 and $91.3 million in FY25 for a total of 124.9. And if you go over here on this side, you have the Western deficit, which is on their estimate 12 million for FY24 and 21.6 for FY25. So that makes a total of about $157 million. That is the bulk of the deficit of the quote system as a whole, coming from those two areas. And we know that the reasons for those deficits are, in the case of CT State, the Students First Plan. That plan was supposed to improve service, save money, and reduce costs of the state. Obviously, it has not. And secondly, improve services to the student. And as I think Kalina will explain, and is in the resolution, there's a proposed over 770 sections which are going to be canceled due to the mitigation measures. So that forms the background to it. And I'll just add two more things. You'll notice that there are two other boxes here. In the June numbers, the situation at Central, which is the best run at this point institution of the 6 or 7, if you include the system office, which they now do, with a June numbers were 13.5 million surplus and a $4.7 million deficit. But in the report to the November meeting, CCSU clearly stated that those figures are inaccurate and have been replaced with 21.1 million surplus in 24 and an expected 5.1 in 25. Similarly, at Eastern, the June numbers were $0 break even in 24 and an $8 million deficit in 25. The numbers presented at the November meeting, special meeting of the board, were not that. They were 2.1 million surplus in 24 and break even in 25. So the difference there is $19.8 million in the case of Central and $10.1 million. That's almost $30 million of an overestimate of the deficit of the system as a whole. I mention that in passing because I have now asked at least 3 times that up-to-date numbers be used, not the numbers from June, but the numbers that the institutions themselves reported based on their third week head counts and so forth for the fall term. And every time I've been turned down saying, no, we have to have consistent numbers or some other excuse of the sort. I'm really a little fed up with that particular line of response. So I think that there are significant problems with the resolution as formulated or as presented at the Finance Committee. I said so. The only person who was expressed any concern was a new member of the board, Mayor Erin Stewart of New Britain, and she voted against the resolution. Everybody else followed the party line and voted for. So that brings us to the resolution, which Kalina has circulated. Kalina, can you put it up? I'll stop sharing here.
Could I please say something?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm looking at the staff report and I'm on page 6 of 8, and it's talking about a 5% increase for the community colleges.
Oh, I'm sorry. Somehow I had 3%. Let me just check. You're on page 6 of 8?
Yes.
Yeah, it was 3% or for 24 for this year.
Ah.
The
5%.
CSUs were 5.
Oh, yes,
and
I'm
we
sorry.
were 3.
My mistake. I carried that
Yeah.
forward. So let's call that a 5% across the board.
Yeah,
Thank you, Lois.
relative. And then I think the dollar amount is it's 246 for community college students and somewhere right about 610
Yeah.
for CSUs.
Yeah, and I'll add that when I pointed out that the total revenue increase due to this increase in tuition and fees was not included in the staff report, Lloyd Blanchard said, well, it's $20 million.
Yeah.
Right, and that is not included in the mitigation report that was approved by the board at its November meeting. That mitigation report, which I've put up, it's hard to read, but it talks about either the deficit that they estimate from June numbers, adjustments updating deficit, which are just minor things in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Though in the case of CT State, it was more significant. New revenue initiatives, and it's only from new enrollments and so-called program initiatives. There is no mention of a tuition increase. So, I have to add to my own frustration of dealing with the folks at the system office in particular, that, one spends a several-hour meeting approving a mitigation measures, and then it turns out that there is a significant mitigation measure which wasn't included in the November meeting, which will be presented at a December meeting after classes have ended, and that is the tuition increase. Right? It's nowhere in their comprehensive mitigation plan from November. Right? And I'll let you draw your own conclusions about the honesty involved in doing something like that, or at least the tactics, let me put it that way. Kalina, do you want to put the resolution up? Or
Hold on.
maybe I can if I can find it.
Well, before we do, can I just ask you I had 2 questions.
Oh, I'm
Goodness,
sorry. Go
what was
ahead.
the second? I have one. Well, I'll have one for now then. You've been consistently asking them not to overstate the deficit. And there is an argument for what they are in fact doing, right? Which is claiming every modification since June as mitigation that we've accomplished to demonstrate to the state that we've done a lot and then request the rest, right? So I understand what they are doing, but I think I don't know if you want to expand a little bit more about why there is such sensitivity that we might have towards them overstating a deficit. Or do you want me? I mean, I have my theory.
Mine is just a question of accuracy, but your theory is as good as any that I've heard.
I mean, my feeling is simply that makes sense. But we also exist in a system that just several months ago, this year, calculated a miscalculated deficit, an overstated deficit, and threatened to cut the number of jobs it would take to fill that deficit at one point. And that was right. That is the place that we don't want to get to. So that has been my understanding, interpretation of why you are so concerned about that, because I understand the other argument also, and I share that concern. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, it's when we have a special meeting of the board and they basically approve that comprehensive set of mitigation measures.
Mhm.
And they know at the time that the numbers they are presenting for the total deficit are inaccurate.
Mhm.
And secondly, they have omitted to include what they do with in the weeks following, namely a tuition and fee increase of 5% across the board.
Mhm.
I find that, let me put it this way, suspicious. You want to, on the one hand, their narrative is the sky is falling, and it is true that there is a significant deficit in two institutions, but when they give the reasons for the deficit, it's a decline in enrollment, it's the state has not provided a sufficient amount, it's changes in the calculation of the fringe benefits, and so on and so forth. And when I say, well, why don't you add two further reasons for this deficit? Number one, the failure of Students First, which was supposed to save money and has now resulted in a tremendous $125 million deficit by your calculation, admittedly using only their June figures. And secondly, a significant deficit, again, by their calculation, over the 2 years of $30 million at Western, largely because while the board was focused only on Students First, they neglected to do what is one of their chief responsibilities, namely to supervise the presidents of the various institutions to make sure that their budgets are balanced. As a result, things went haywire at Western. The president there, which is now 3 presidents ago, because they're now into their second interim president, apparently did what he wanted, blew through his reserves, and went into excessive deficit. So when I said to them, why don't you put those also as reasons for the deficit? They said, oh no, we can't do that. We're not doing that. And then I pointed out my third point, which is, in that case, they are not only refusing to admit their own responsibility for this excessive deficit, but they are transferring the cost of it to the students through this 5% increase. Why not for the year FY25, and just for that 1 year, use the system reserves that they have, over $250 million, a good percentage of which, the majority of which, is available for so-called current operating expenses. And their response is, oh no, we can only use the reserves for very limited things. They're going to lend Western $5 million. They're going to provide some reserves from the CT state reserves, that is to say, the accumulated reserves of all the 12 community colleges. But they have to save, I don't know, for 3 months in reserve, just in case, for example, the state decided one day not to pay a cent to the system. That's absurd as well. And I think that, if they are responsible by their negligence twice, once in terms of Students First and the promises it made, and secondly, in terms of not supervising what's going on at Western, and I see Ritu is going to either correct me or add to it, and then, there's something that is amiss in their whole presentation. And that's what I basically said at the Finance Committee meeting.
Go ahead, Ritu.
I'm not going to correct you, David. You are absolutely correct. And shall I add? I mean, or maybe you were too nice to them. I think it's gross with what's happening. What has happened at Western since 2011, pretty much, with the loss of reserves, and then which continuing until today, until this day, is gross mismanagement and incompetence. In short. But I also have a question. So you said the system office has reserves of more than $250 million. Where did they get those reserves?
Yeah, well, when Brandon comes on, maybe we'll ask him. He's been sort of investigating some of those things. But, each institution, when it has a surplus, puts it into its reserves, right? So, for example, Central had whatever surplus it has in a year, it goes into, I don't know, there's a big piggy bank somewhere. Maybe it's in pennies. I don't think so. I guess it's in a bank account somewhere. And, in the governor's budget, the OPM, dinged the system basically for 3 things. One was the decline in absolute numbers of headcount. 2 was the decline in percentage of students in higher education. And 3 was they mentioned the reserves. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Now, I disagree entirely with their using only the headcount criteria as the metric to judge the success of the institutions. There's retention rates, there's graduation rates, there's percentage of students who stay in the state and become productive citizens. There's a lot of other considerations, including qualitative ones, they didn't take into account. But it's pretty clear to me, and this is a conjecture on my part, I've never talked to these people, but it's pretty clear to me that they're looking at the system with its exaggerated request from CSU 2030. And they're saying, hey, by the way, you guys have 200 million. Let me just use that number. I've now don't have it quite in front of me, but it's probably somewhere in between 200 and 250. You have all this money in your reserves, and you keep coming to us and asking for more money. Why are you not using some of those reserves? And my proposal was use some of the reserves for some of the deficit for 1 year FY25. Rather than having the negative publicity, which is already circulating, oh, another 5%. I asked students in one of my class, I said, how many of you think that this will have a negative impact on students remaining at the university? Right. And 12 of them said yes, 3 of them said no, and 6 of them, was a class of about 25, said they weren't sure. I had a student come up to me, one of the students who I'm supervising for a senior thesis in peace studies. He says, well, I'm glad I'm graduating now because I don't want to pay another 5%. Yet at the system office, they can't figure this out at all. So that's the situation as it is now.
Well, the reason I asked was, well, wherever that money, the reserves came from, that the only sources of revenues we get, whether it's the community colleges, the CSUs, or the system office, is the block grant and from students. So if any of us is having financial trouble for whatever reason, that's what the reserves are for. We
Yes.
just return them back into the institution that needs it and the students who need it. And I think that's the reason we should not increase tuition and fees at any of the institutions, because we're just returning that money back to students.
Ratu, I entirely agree with you. At the finance committee meeting, they usually just show disdain whenever I bring this up. And they say, well, you know, the industry standards are holding 25% of your expenses in reserves. And I responded to them. I said, you know, this isn't like a bank which is holding reserves in case there's a run on the bank. And this is not like an individual who's keeping, you know, 3 or 6 months reserve of salary in reserves or equivalent to salary in reserves in case you get suddenly laid off. I agree with your argument, Ratua, and I'm going to make it again on Thursday at the board meeting. So, I mean, if you could summarize it and send it to me as you just said it, I would appreciate that. I see Brendan here is now in. Brendan, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm almost out of the car, but yeah, I just have to state again that in my opinion, the reason the system office and the BOR was set up was to look out for the interest of the lenders, the people that lent the state of Connecticut the money to build all these nice buildings. And those reserves are there probably to pay off a big chunk of those loans should the BOR decide they want to do that. And, you know, I'll leave it to you to think about why they might want to do that. And that's where those funds come from. Essentially, the system office is collecting, is a bill collector. They collect the payments from the campuses and then pay the bonds with what they collect. And they charge a little on top of that for that wonderful service and retain it in their reserves. So I don't think we should ever lose sight of the fact that a big part of what they try to do is make sure the lenders get paid. That's why you don't hear them talking about education a whole lot, in my opinion. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Brendan. That's another perspective I didn't have. Other comments?
I have another question, and I haven't looked at the resolution closely enough, but I believe what you were saying about the way that it's written seems to suggest that it's possible that this amount could be adjusted, that this resolution authorizes a change to the tuition and fees, but doesn't specify the amount, and that it could be adjusted appropriately and the board simply informed. Is that correct?
I think that's a worst case scenario, but I think it's possible.
I mean, they
What
could
it
also
says,
have it as a best case scenario, right? They might also say, well, if the state bails us out, you know what I mean? Like it could go either way, but that seems to be how it functions.
well, the word is adjustment,
Yeah.
right? And it gives the chancellor the power to make adjustments to the tuition and fees and schedules as approved herein, provided such adjustments shall not significantly increase the overall cost of tuition and mandatory fees as set by the BOR. So significantly increase, not
But
necessarily
also
decrease.
significantly.
Yes, significantly. So what does
Right.
significantly mean?
So
Does
there's
it mean
both.
1%? Does it mean 2%? I don't know what it is. I would like to have seen what significantly means. And then they go on to say, assuring that the overall financial burden on students remains limited. What does limited mean? And again, it's this vague terminology.
Yeah.
Now, this resolution was not included in the original agenda for the Finance Committee meeting,
Right.
and it was a blank page. And the answer that I got from the person at the board, also named Cunningham, as it turns out, was that, well, it was being sent to the Attorney General's office for consideration, right, for adjudication. So obviously they weren't sure that they could get away with simply allowing the chancellor to make adjustments, and the terminology they'd use, right? And it says here that those adjustments shall be promptly reported to the BOR Finance and Infrastructure Committee
Right.
for review.
Right.
Right? And does that mean and vote? I'm
So
not
it
sure.
appears that they voted to authorize a fee adjustment of roughly whatever. And I appreciated the fact that when you pointed out that the amount, the percentage or the amount was not on the resolution, the chair of the committee said, "Oh, yes, how did I miss that?" So he did not express that it was intentional. He
You know,
he also acknowledged not reading closely enough in the past. So
I'm tired of that particular excuse, right? Because basically how things have functioned up to now and how they seem to continue to function is that the system office decides and forwards a resolution, and then the board rubber stamps.
right,
These are not resolutions that were developed by the Finance Committee. These are resolutions that you get
right,
a day or two before the meeting, right?
right.
And then somebody comes and explains with a whole set of PowerPoints, things which weren't even in the staff report, and then people are expected to simply put up their
Right.
hand and vote yay.
I mean, he probably received it less than 24 hours before the meeting.
Well, in this case, it was Monday. It came Monday, but it didn't have the resolution, and the resolution came, I believe, later on Monday afternoon. But it could have been Tuesday morning. I don't think it makes much of a difference. I mean, there has been cases where a resolution has come less than 12 hours before the meeting.
Yeah.
That was one to reduce by $8
And
million.
skipped the committee at
budgets.
as well, right?
Yes.
Skipped the committee, went straight to the
Yeah.
board. Yeah, and that was a disastrous one.
Right. So, at
But
the
yeah, I
end
think
of
we
the
should reach
finance,
out, and nobody at the meeting affirmed that that was intentional. Right? So, okay.
they're not going to, I mean, I don't know if it was intentional or not. I assume that once they sent it to the Attorney General's office, that what they submitted was what they intended to submit.
Okay. Andre
Sorry,
and Brendan?
Yeah, go ahead, Andre. I'll jump in later.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question. I just looked at the schedule of meetings, for the Board of Regents. and there is a column here that says Student Advisory Committee. There is such a body, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
And their last meeting was November 21. That was before this wonderful resolution was proposed, wasn't it?
Yes, but I believe that Lloyd, the one item on the agenda, because I actually looked at it,
Mm.
was the tuition increase.
and they appear
Or
to
the-
have had a special meeting this morning also that we noticed
did.
just now.
No, because I remember when I went to UConn, there was a tuition increase that Governor Mestel put in, and I was one of those folks who were organizing against that. Maybe the students here can help us.
Yeah, I mean, David, did any student regent attend?
There was
that
one, I believe there was one student region who attended, and she left after about 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
Well, maybe we have to somehow communicate that to more students.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at what the agenda item is on their student advisory committee meeting today. So we'll look it up.
It is that. Brendan?
Yeah, I just wanted to put out there too. It's completely unclear to me how this meshes with students' decisions to enroll on our campuses. Like, what are we asking them to do? Like, decide to come and then pay a bill with an unknown amount on it? Like, what is the plan here? Like, because we're talking about students deciding, what in the next 3 or 4 months, and they're supposed to just like roll the dice that Chang won't increase their tuition by another 3%. Like, do we think that's going to be good for enrollments? I just I don't understand this at all.
Jonathan?
Do you mind just forwarding that? So I'm digging through my email. I know that you forwarded it to us, but it's not posted publicly. Can you just send it again, David, or share it just to look at that part again to make sure we're interpreting it right? And
What,
sorry, John,
the resolution?
the resolution. Yeah, I
Their
just
resolution.
don't. I'd like to look at it.
Yeah, I haven't got anything that it could be modified, I suppose, for the meeting of the board, but I doubt it. Well,
And John?
Yeah, so I just wanted to,
I think this is it. I'm not sure. Do you see it?
Yes. Thanks.
Okay, so it's there's resolved as the whereas is all basically formalities. The result is that the BOR approves the FY25
Mhm.
tuition and mandatory fee increases and schedules. So that's the increases of specific items per institution, as presented in the attached staff report and attachments to the attached staff report. Right. And be it further, the BOR grants the CSU chancellor the authority to make any necessary adjustments, the term is adjustments, to the FY25 tuition and fee rates and schedules as approved herein, provided that such adjustments shall not significantly increase the overall cost of tuition and mandatory fees as set by the BOR, ensuring that the overall financial burden on students remains limited. Now, what does substantially mean? What does limited mean? That's not defined, of course. Any such adjustments shall be promptly reported to the BOR Finance and Infrastructure Committee for review, right? And what does review mean? Does that mean simply that you discuss it, or does it mean that you actually approve it? Then the last result is that the FY25 tuition and mandatory fee increases may be revised or reconsidered by the BOR as the BOR deems appropriate. So that leaves open the possibility, yes, it's a possibility that the chancellor increases it by some amount that he considers not significant and otherwise limited, and that it is reported to the Finance and Infrastructure Committee, and that the BOR deems it appropriate not to vote on it or to simply approve it. I don't know.
Interesting. All right, John?
yeah, just quickly to Andre's point, the 4Cs are pushing for, faculty to reach out to students and for, us to make students aware. I think in most of our experiences, students have their noses to the grindstone. They're just barely keeping on top of everything. And then, to have a larger political awareness of these things that are happening on Mount Olympus that seem so distant from them and yet really impact their lives. I think it is important to really, raise awareness with our students. So.
Yes, agreed. And of course, when this is done to be at a board meeting to be held during the final exam week, how many students are going to be, ready to say, oh, I'm going to go down and protest, or, I'm going to write to my legislator or something like that? Very few.
Yeah, that's exactly why the timing.
Yes, of course. I mean, there's no mystery to that. This is the famous 4 o'clock on Friday email telling you that something momentous has just happened. We used to get those pretty often. This is the BOR equivalent. Are we ready to pass to the resolution? I think I'm actually
Sure, and I
capable
think
of-
I have it.
No, I
So,
think I've got it. You can see it? Proposed
well, do you
resolution?
have, what version do you have? Okay.
Nope, I have the most recent one.
all
If you
right.
want to put the most recent one up, go ahead, please.
It looks okay. Okay, I'll do it. Sure.
Just because you probably have the most recent version.
Okay. How's that? Large enough? Do we need to read all the way through?
Well, perhaps for the record, do you want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Sure.
I'm going to sing it.
Please do.
Whereas in 2017, the Board of Regents implemented a plan known as Students First to both decrease costs and improve services to students. Whereas in 2023, after consolidating the 12 community colleges into one institution and failing to supervise that all institutional budgets were balanced, the board now reports a deficit of over 125 million.
Oh, is it 25?
Yeah, I added wrong. For the community college and nearly 30 million for one of the universities, Western. That's for FY 24-25 total.
Just one of the benefits of reading out loud.
Yes,
Mhm.
thanks. Whereas the community college proposes to cut a further 776 course sections, thereby reducing educational opportunities rather than increasing them and necessitating decreased enrollment. Whereas further problems for the community college students have resulted from the lack of teach out from previous college programs to the new aligned ones, and policies inadequate to the task of transition have only exacerbated difficulties. I think that's a referral to CPOS. Whereas essential services to the community college students have been reduced by the elimination of hundreds of educational assistants and other contingent workers who constitute the majority of the workforce at the community colleges, with the inevitable result of reduced retention. Whereas the system office and the board failed to secure sufficient state assistance for FY25 by proposing an inflated CSCU 2030 plan, uninformed by the needs of the system and the state, which was countered by an inadequate offer by the Office of Planning and Management as incorporated in the governor's budget and improved with improvement only for FY24 by the legislature. That's quite a mouthful, that one. Whereas the board approved a 3% fee increase for community college students and a 5% tuition increase for university students for FY24, and is now proposing a further 5%, changing that because it's for both, increase for FY25 for both groups, for each group. Despite the likelihood that this will further reduce enrollment and retention rates, which the Office of Planning and Management uses as an inappropriate gauge of our funding requirements. Whereas this increase applies to both community and university students in an attempt to remediate in part the system-wide debt incurred by a failed policy of students first and the concomitant failure to supervise all member institutions in CSU for balanced budgets. Whereas his effort to remediate through increased tuition is simultaneous with remediation through significant cuts to institutions, requiring students to pay more for far less, and to do so amid the disruption caused by the launch of the new community college. Boy. Whereas The disproportionate impact of this mismanagement and state underfunding on community colleges represents not only a significant failure of the Board of Regents in its responsibilities to public higher education and the state, but also the exact opposite of the advertised benefits of the board initiative that is students first, an impact which satisfies the definition of both institutionalized racism and structural injustice. Wow. Whereas no member of the administration, Board of Regents, or government agency has been held to account for the failure, but through tuition increase and hollowed out institutions, students are being asked to bear its consequences. That is a whole page of whereases, and I think some of them are really good. Be it resolved, and that's the part I should have sung. Be it resolved that the FAC consider that Students First has failed to achieve its twin advertised goals of reducing costs to the state while improving educational opportunities and services to the students, and has contributed to a financially perilous situation for the CSU system as a whole. That be it resolved that the FAC rejects the average tuition increase of 5% approved by the BOR Finance and Infrastructure Committee on December 6, 2023, as detrimental to the goals of recruiting and retaining students at a reasonable cost to them, that the FAC communicates its resolution to the Finance and Infrastructure Committee of the Board of Regents, CSU leadership, and to the next meeting of the board.
Motion to approve.
I have some,
Yeah, can we talk about it first?
please.
Sure.
Lois?
Go ahead, Lois.
All right, on the second whereas,
Yes.
but in 2023, after consolidating 12 community colleges into one institution, failing to supervise all institutions' budgets were balanced, board is now reports. We are not running a deficit because of a budget that wasn't balanced in 2023. This has been building for years, rampant spending on a consolidation that was to cost nothing at all. I can't agree to say just because 2023 was, they didn't watch that balanced budget, where that's where our problems lie. It's
How
not.
about failing for years to ensure?
And failing 4 years, okay. And that'll make it explicit.
Then on the next resolution where it says, whereas the
What a
community
second, let me
college
just get this
proposes
in.
to cut a further 776 core sections, actually, when you add it up, it's 777 core sections, that's not actually true. This is the 700 and, as they say, 776 core sections are fiscal year 24. So those would include sections that have already been cut this fall, for this fall.
Should I add for FY24?
This is where
As
proposed to
cut.
cut 777 core sections in fiscal year 24.
Yeah, for FY24. Okay, I've added that. Anything else?
Yes, in this one where it says, whereas the system office and the board failed to secure sufficient state assistance for fiscal year 25 year, I think you need to take out year after the number 25.
Done.
And also, it's not the Office of Planning and Management, it's the Office of Policy and Management.
Ah, thank you.
And in the next resolution, well, I think you might have corrected that one for the 5%.
Yeah.
I would, and the resolution says, whereas this effort to remediate through increased tuition is simultaneous with remediation through significant cuts to institutions, however, requiring students to pay more for far less, I would put a comma there.
Pay
After
more.
less.
For far less. Yes, there is a comma.
Okay, and then on the next one, whereas no member of the administration, Board of Regents, or government agency has been held to account for the failure, but through tuition increases. That to me reads like the students, they're not being held responsible, the students. I would say for the failure, comma, while, comma, through tuition increases and hollowed out institutions, comma, students are being asked to bear its consequences.
Okay. Done. Mike?
You.
Somebody else? Go ahead. Okay.
Oh, no, I was just saying, thanks for the edits.
Yes, I was going to say that too, because they were some of the ones I was going to mention. But let's go back to the beginning. Whereas for years to supervise. the community college, okay. Um, the one that's, okay, whereas further, I'm sorry, I only heard you
Yeah.
reading it, so I have to look at it again. Whereas further problems with the community college. Okay, so is there something about the fourth or fifth one, whereas essential services at community college have been reduced by the elimination of hundreds of educational assistants and other contingent workers who constitute the majority of the workforce?
Yeah, there's something missing there.
I thought we might want to say something, not what kind of work for, in other words, is it either student-centered workforce in some way, or is it, you know,
Student serving.
yeah, something, it's not just people, in the mail.
Okay, I'll put in
Their
student serving.
term is student facing, but do we want that?
I like student serving better, actually.
Okay,
But aren't we all serving students?
yeah,
Can we say student serving or student facing supplemental workforce because they're on top of.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue here, I agree with Jennifer, something that, if you'd cut these, I mean, are these workers mostly working directly with students or more indirectly with students?
directly,
know?
they're like tutors and like, they are usually directly, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of, as opposed to
Yeah.
people who are manning an RA desk or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
Okay.
It might be too much to add, but I also, sorry to interject, but real quick, it might, that these are people who oftentimes have been longstanding people that the college has invested a lot of time in training.
hmm
So that institutional history was lost with them as well.
Of reduced retention and loss of, say again, Jen? Loss of institutional memory.
Well-trained, student-facing, however you want to call it. But they are sort of, I mean, a lot of people argue they're student-facing.
Okay, well-trained, student-facing supplemental workforce with the inevitable result of reduced
that, yeah.
retention and
do we
loss
want
of
to say
institutional memory.
supplemental workforce? And the reason I ask is just because, for example, when we're talking about adjuncts, the majority of the workforce is, like we can't get by without them at this point. It's maybe not the majority of, I think maybe also the majority of the courses, I'm not sure.
Because majority implies that, I mean, the problem is that most of the, EAs work part-time, okay? So
Mhm.
the majority of workforce that, on a per person basis, that's not accurate. I would say a major portion of our workforce, okay, and students, I guess.
So you read workforce as not just head count, but as the actual contribution, which, yeah, and we'd switch staffing to correct that. So
Can we
Well,
that's
put in,
good.
can we put in tutor? Are we mostly talking about tutors instead of supplemental?
No, we're talking about library staff or all different offices.
Maybe we should include, saying including, because I think, when you say workforce, somebody who isn't in the system, they may not understand what we're talking about.
Okay,
So that might be helpful to actually, list, including, tutors and library workers, because that I think most people will recognize as something, yeah, that's important.
I was just going to say that. That's the good fix.
So including tutors,
library staff, they work in ed tech, right? Or how about tech support? No.
okay,
I feel like
tutors,
there's,
library staff.
how about this? We reserve this, that we go and check where they are most represented and add those categories in.
Yeah, well, why don't we just have as placeholders with
Yeah.
the three that we just mentioned,
Okay.
including, but not limited to, tutors, library staff, educational tech support, etc., and others. With the inevitable result of reduced student retention and loss of institutional memory.
Yes. Oh, and Jen, you wanted well-trained.
Yeah, I added well-trained student facing supplemental
Gotcha.
workforce. Okay,
All right, you got that sentence because I did not put it in here, but you have it.
I got it.
Yes?
Okay, and then the one before that,
Oh.
whereas further problems for the community colleges resulted from the lack of teaching out from previous college programs to the new aligned ones and from policies, is that what we mean? Is it from those two things?
Yes.
Okay, that would be clearer.
Yeah.
And then further down, where the next one after the one we worked on, whereas the system office of the board failed to secure. I'm not. I just wonder whether this next one, everything there seems central to me about. Except, was it fully uninformed by the needs of the system and the state? I mean, do we really need to say that, or do we just want to say it was inflated and it was countered by an inadequate offer? It may be that that's true, but I'm wondering if that's helpful. Because I think it was, they were trying to say something about the needs of the system and the state.
Well, the question is, what basis did they actually use to come up with the plan? And since I don't remember it being discussed anywhere, it's just,
Yeah, I guess I mean, I just don't know what that's gaining us. That's all.
My read on it is that there are so many good points that we can strongly consider tone, Mike. So I agree with you that we can soften things that can be stated in other ways.
I mean, the
We can
important thing
eliminate
was
that.
that it was inflated and it was countered by an inadequate, to me.
Yeah, that's fine. Mike, I agree. I think that's an amendment we can incorporate.
Okay,
And
got it.
and then further down, whereas the board of the student proposing a similar. Okay, whereas this increase applies to an attempt to remediate parts. Okay, whereas this effort to remediate through increased risk is simultaneous with remediation through significant cuts to institutions. Okay. Yep. Okay, and then whereas the disproportionate impact of this mismanagement and state underfunding. Oh, you want to capitalize Board of Regents? You've done it in
Yeah.
the last one.
Yep. Where is that? Board?
Right there.
Yep.
Yeah, and then board comes up again in that clause.
Yep.
Yeah.
A board initiative. Yep, gotcha.
And then the one that I think Lois, that one there that we just made to while makes a lot more sense. It wasn't clear before. So yeah, thank you. I just, when I was hearing it, read a couple
Cool.
things.
Got all that. Got all that.
All right. All right, so I think all of those edits are on this document except for this paragraph, which you have, David, and we'll,
Yeah,
modify
but you
after
basically
the
got
fact.
it. You basically got it.
okay.
I can't see it now, but was there a section about racism in here?
There was, it is right here.
Do we want to make that section more robust, or are we happy with it?
What are you thinking?
I can barely read it because it's so tiny. So I'm trying
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
trying to find my glasses.
I'll make it bigger. So I'll read it. Whereas the disproportionate impact of this mismanagement and state underfunding on community colleges represents not only a significant failure of the Board of Regents and its responsibilities to public higher education in the state, but also the exact opposite of the advertised benefits of the board initiative that is students first, an impact which satisfies the definitions of both institutionalized racism and structural injustice.
that needs to be elaborated on.
I
Yep.
think so too.
I would do it a different way. What if we got rid of the first part and made the first part a second part? In other words, I think it would make two whereases here. So, the but also should be its own whereas.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then that highlights it seems to me.
Yes, and what can be done is the one of the claims they made that but also the opposite of the advertised benefits of the board initiative of the students first for students of color, and
Yeah. Black and Latino students, Latinx students, we are building this institution for you, or something like that.
you
And
know,
then we have to change that sentence,
Yeah.
David, so it's a sentence now, whereas the state.
whereas the increase.
Oh, wait, how did that happen? Did I scramble a sentence somehow?
Well, the suggestion here is to say
Oh.
that whereas the tuition fee increase has the exact opposite
State.
Effect.
effect
Of the
the
advertised
advertised
benefits.
benefits of the board initiative that is students first towards, or for. And here, how do you want to put it, Kalina? Students of color, or do you want to enumerate?
Well, I think institutionalized racism and structural injustice, I think, kind of covers everything.
Yeah, so we had, so whereas the tuition fee increase has exact opposite effect of the advertised benefits of the board initiative that is students first for students of color, an impact which satisfies the definitions of both institutional racism and structural injustice.
Yeah, that's it.
I wouldn't say for students of color because it's particularly notable that they advertise this college as being specifically built for Black and Latinx students. That was,
Okay.
you know,
You
the
wanna-
article. However, I think more fundamentally, this is it's also a deep class issue.
So
That
students
is
of
itself
color,
its own injustice.
and for economically disadvantaged students and students of color.
Yeah.
Would that satisfy you?
Ye-
Economically disadvantaged,
Yeah, I think that's really good because it's class and
Yeah.
advantaged students and students of color.
Mhm.
Dash. Okay.
I was wondering if we could list a couple examples here as well, because I feel like people could gloss over this, and we have so many examples.
We sure do.
So, is there a way to succinctly list a few? I just think this is one of the most important points. So,
Yeah.
I don't want it to be dismissed because that I would argue it's definitely as significant as listing tutors, right? So I mean, we pause there.
well, one thing about that, I agree with you, Jennifer. And one thing, besides examples, it probably would be good if this were first or last rather than, so I would put it as the last one, you know, because rhetorically, beginning, end, and stuff gets lost in the middle.
Yeah, so we'd read, so we'll change it and put it the last one.
But I still think Jen's idea of examples is a good idea. I just don't know what they would be yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just the
Well,
very fact that the institution that serves the least advantaged students in the state is the one that opens with a deficit is just like on its face, right? I mean, its disinvestment is classic, right? But then there are all the other policy things that are still contentious, right? Like changes to developmental ed, we can't nail down because we no longer know exactly what they'll be and they're under debate, or the ESL offerings. We do know that a lot of these EA reductions have made it impossible for working students to access a library, which is a source of internet, textbook, everything. We know that tutors are reduced. We know that veteran services have been reduced. We know that disability services have been reduced.
I don't know if he has it at his fingertips, but I know JD Matheson did a lot of collecting of data on students of color when we shifted to PA 1240, and that there was significant lower percentage of Black male students who were passing the courses. I don't know if that's changed or not. I don't know if we have to cite any of their research. But
I wonder if instead of examples, which might be really hard to, maybe we should what about making this the very first one?
Well, I think
I-
I'd leave it where it is.
I thought
But
of that too, but then you have to reference the fee impact
And the students first.
and the failure of
Yeah.
students for,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
so.
I'd leave it here, and I know I'd skip the examples. We can come up later on with, something further which exemplifies
Right.
all of that. But I think we were basically focusing on the impact of the tuition and fee increase, right? And we said that it has reduced services and it decreased the number of sections. And then we say, well, the whole consolidation of the community colleges was supposed to favor economically disadvantaged and students of color. And obviously it can't be doing that because of all of the previous whereases that we've cited.
Yeah. Well, one other thing I want to mention that is tangential to all this is I think we should tell our respective campuses to circulate this to the respective student governments. I think they should know that the faculty, advisory council committee is supporting them.
Yeah, we can add that in the end. Communicates this resolution to the Finance and Infrastructure, CS to the next meeting of the board, as well as student government, as well as
Student
Respective-
governance. Jeff.
faculty and student governance.
Because that's one way of raising that consciousness that we talked about, where they're not aware of what's going on. So we could both tell them that it's happening and by means of saying that it was something, a resolution that was supporting them.
Well, and also, I'm sorry to chime in again without raising my hand, but real quick, I think, I don't know who exactly the audience is for this resolution, but it would be powerful if at one of those presentations with the board, if one of the representatives of some student organizations were to say the Faculty Advisory Council really supported us, and then they read it to them, right? Came from a student, and they would have to respond in a way, I think, that was different than how they responded to us. But I think it was a great suggestion, Mike, to let them know. And I definitely think reps need to make sure they're reading this to their campus faculty.
Yeah.
But of course, all this is happening after the last meeting of every university senate and every student government. So, that was clearly intentional. I can't remember when they said they were going to normally increase the university rates, but it wasn't, they were supposed to be at different times, and it definitely wasn't at the last meeting during the exam week in the month of December. That's for sure.
They had aspired to do it in October, like in the fall, so that financial aid packaging
one of
can
them.
be done.
And
Yeah,
then
but
later-
usually like October or November kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not the schedule that they wanted to have,
No.
and they are sneaking this in as a remediation measure, when in the comprehensive plan that they had at the last special meeting, it wasn't included at all. Mike?
One last minor point. The title should have, the very title at the top should have increases should be capitalized.
Yes, and resolution, it's not a proposed resolution. And increases will be capitalized.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Having a
Yep.
professor of English on the
Yeah,
board
Lois,
is always for philosophers who look at the concepts and hardly at their spelling, very important.
Okay.
can I please say something?
Go ahead.
Right, at the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing is minor, but it's where you've got where while is, while through tuition, could we just make increases
Where is that?
Got it.
Right there.
right
Right
there? And could scroll down to the bottom further.
Mhm.
We've got this to the next meeting of the board, faculty and student governance bodies. Could we just make it faculty and students and not governance bodies? Because our governance body is lunacy.
And I think you forgot to
Well-
type in effect, David. You have the exact opposite, but you said effect but didn't type it on the.
Oh. This is me, so we're both typing in different
Oh,
places.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I have. We'll compare
We'll
the
make
two
sure
and-
we'll make sure it's complete after the fact.
As the other English professor here.
Okay, so motion to adopt as amended.
A second? Okay. All in, actually, let me stop sharing so we can see. All in
I just
favor?
had a quick question, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I had my,
Actually, I just want to say,
Bring it
after
back
it's
up.
approved for a motion, there actually is supposed to be discussion first. Kalina, so I just want to mention that before the vote.
Oh, yeah, we had did we not have a motion? Oh, we didn't, maybe. Sorry. Go ahead.
am I going ahead?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sorry. I was too slow there, but I lost where we had talked about the language of economically disadvantaged.
Mhm.
Yeah, we added that in.
I was losing where we were scrolling back. I just
David,
lost where it was. Where did that land?
Yeah, it landed in the final whereas the tuition fee increase has the exact opposite effect of the advertised benefits of the board initiative that is for students first to benefit economically disadvantaged and students of color.
Oh my
An
God.
impact, and I would say a negative impact, which satisfies the definitions of both institutional racism and structural injustice.
Hold on one second. I'm gonna try to do that for you in a second. Let me just, what the heck?
You want me to do it?
Hold up. I got it. I just wanna have it all in one spot. Okay, so can you read it again? Has the exact opposite effect of the advertised benefits of the board initiatives that is students first on, is it here?
No,
To benefit economically disadvantaged and students of color.
Two, right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're talking about the advertised benefits.
David, take a
Yeah.
look at that, what she's typing. Is that, should it go before or after the dash?
Before the dash.
Okay.
Economic disadvantage and students of color.
Okay.
And you can
Here.
say an impact or a negative impact, as you please.
Yeah, I would add negative after
Yeah,
that.
so change and to a negative impact. Good.
Cool.
Okay. So now I think we can proceed to the motion.
Okay, once more, as amended.
Seconded.
Second. All right. Now, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
Yeah.
Anyone abstaining?
Attention.
Who? Okay.
Linda.
Is that you, Linda?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
David, can you,
I see
once this is finalized, can you just deliberately mail that alone to all the members,
Everybody.
Galena?
Yeah,
Just okay, because I don't want to wait to have to get it through some other means to get it to the Senate.
absolutely.
Right.
Plus, we now have a plan to airdrop it directly to all faculty and staff rather than governance bodies, so. we're
Which
gonna
is
have to
why
do it.
we want, yeah, get it as
Yeah.
soon as possible. Thank you.
Yes, and I will send a copy to all the members of the board. I think we should. Because otherwise they're not going to see it.
And certainly to the student advisory committee.
Yeah.
Right?
And what we will do is read it out at the board meeting. Now, we've asked them now for 4 years straight to have an agenda item for the faculty advisory committee. And the system office still is not able to figure this one out, and basically declines. So we will interrupt or insert at the appropriate time in the discussion on that resolution and read out this resolution.
By the way, I just noticed, doesn't Pamela Hedin usually attend these meetings?
Yep, usually.
She's not here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
probably had another meeting.
Okay, just curious.
She might have actually gone to this, I don't know, student meeting.
Okay. I've lost track of the agenda. What's next?
Refugee policy
Okay.
update.
Refugee policy. Okay, we're going to have to kick that one to next month. I asked, but I asked with not a lot of time to spare, and I haven't had a chance to get an update yet on exactly how it's implemented. Hopefully, either Provost Cathuria or somebody who is managing this currently will give us a written report or attend the meeting next time. But my first my first inquiry was just, who do I ask about this? And it turns out it's him. So yeah, I didn't give him a lot of notice. I know he's out of town at a conference, so maybe next time. John, cultural programming, or actually, sorry, Brendan, that was your agenda item. Do you want to say anything more about that before we move on? Okay.
No, I'm okay to wait till we get an update.
Okay. All right, John, cultural programming.
Thanks. Yeah, I won't spend a lot of time on this. I talked at length the last meeting or the meeting before. But just briefly, a recap at Quinnebog Valley, we've had a cultural programming committee that has worked for years to bring programming to the students. And we had a budget of $11,500. And most of that money was taken without notice to anyone, any faculty member, committee member, or chair of the committee over the summer, leaving us with $1,000, so over a 90% cut. A few of us at Quinnebog have followed up with that. We want to talk with John Paul Chason Cardenas I hope to report back today that we had a meeting with him. I've been pressing for a meeting. That hasn't happened. It looks now, based on conversations yesterday, that is finally going to happen. But just a couple of things on this. One is that I feel a little funny, kind of bringing this up or taking our time with this because it seems on one hand to be small potatoes compared, we're dealing with these enormous, devastating issues, losing EAs, losing, 777 sections. And I'm talking about funding for poetry readings and that kind of thing. But I just wanted to point out that losing this budget and taking the budgets from other campuses results in almost no savings, in terms of helping the overall budget situation. And yet it has a devastating impact on the quality of life for students. And I think that there could be false thinking about bread versus roses. Cultural programming is extracurricular, but it's not extra. I think we need it if we're going to seriously call ourselves a community college, DC State Community College, unless we're just going to be a workforce training center. So anyway, there are many more reasons why I've been opposed to that, but I came to the FAC committee because this small local issue seems to be shot through with so many of the issues that we're talking about on faculty advisory committee about the planning and the consolidation, the respect for local autonomy and faculty, and if we are really serving students, et cetera, et cetera. I did send an email to community college members of this committee, and it was following up on my question for the committee if anyone could speak to their experiences on their campuses, community college campuses, if they had parallel committees that also faced a similar situation. And I wanted to do this so I would be best informed when I met with Vice President Chazon Cardenas. And so I sent an email, and the email that I received back was not from anyone that I had put in the to column. The email came back from Vice President John Paul Chazon Cardenas. So one of two things happened. Either someone who I sent this email to, who I think everyone on the email was part of this committee, unless I, mistakenly put in an email someplace. Either someone in this committee just forwarded that email without my permission to John Paul Chazon Cardenas, or someone on this committee in seeking information from their campus maybe forwarded my email saying, hey, I'm trying to find this out from the FAC committee, and that person forwarded it. So that is just, I wanted to raise that as a concern, because in either case, whoever forwarded that email to Chazon Cardenas without my permission, I refrained from ad hominem, but it was less than collegial, and it seems not a good protocol, bordering on unethical. The issue is not that there was anything in that email that I was trying to hide. In fact, it summarized information that I had made in this public recorded meeting just before that. And it includes items and content that I have either already said or will do plan to expand on when we meet with Chazon Cardenas. So that's not the issue. The issue is that by forwarding that it preempted and subverted my attempt to be fully informed when I do meet with Chazon Cardenas. So I just wanted to note this and just say, hey, let's not do that. I think we just need to respect each other and, realize that's just not okay.
Great. Andre?
Yeah, I don't see that I received your email. I assume that I would have, but
I'm sorry, where do you teach, Effort?
Tunxus.
Sorry. Oh, you teach at Tunxus.
Yeah.
Okay, I missed you on the email sending. Sorry about that. And if I missed others, I'll have to go back through the email to make sure. I know that everyone in the email does work at a community college, but I'm not. I may have missed. Obviously, I did miss someone. So, Andre, I will forward that to you,
Great, thank
and I'll forward the whole thread so that including the response from Chazon Cardenas, et cetera.
Just a quick question, John. Do you want to also include, I know we're not teaching there, but do you want to include the CSU people as well? Because I didn't get one either, but it makes sense.
Sure. As a matter of FYI, I could send to everyone. Just send it to the whole FAC committee. That'd be fine. Thanks, Michael.
So.
Yeah.
And I feel like this this issue is almost continuous with, like I said, other stuff has popped up about CPOS that isn't strictly our domain, right? It should be the institution's domain, but the discrepancy between what community college students are afforded, what university students are afforded, or just what the ideals of a liberal arts education are, is the area of our concern, and we're waiting to have that conversation with the ASA committee. This seems to be continuous with that problem, right? This idea that, just deliver the courses, get the credits, graduate. This seems to be what we're moving towards. So I wonder whether a group of us, including university members, might want to get together between now and the next meeting and just make some statement, resolution, recommendations, or even just have a conversation about the issue and see if we can do something productive in that area, because still haven't had the opportunity to figure out in what way we're going to have this conversation with ASA, but it seems to be broader than just CPOS.
While we're on the topic of email, I don't know if anybody else received it, but I received an email containing a shared document on a Google Drive, I think, purporting to come from Terrence Chang.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And, I did click on it because it doesn't, in my email in Outlook, it doesn't indicate anymore whether it comes from an external source or internal source. So I clicked on it. And as a result, I got an email in response back from someone in the security service at the system office that I had clicked on on a test of my ability to distinguish between phishing and non-phishing, and I would now be required to undergo training to distinguish between the two, listing as the link that I have to click another external source, right? Personally, I object to this kind of attempt to hoodwink members of the FAC. It certainly looked like a genuine thing. I will certainly not click on anything that I get from the system office again, or which purports to come from the system office, and certainly not one subsequently from the system office telling me to click on yet another external link. I sent a note of protest to the system vice president for academic affairs, as I didn't have the email of the individual who is in charge of security service at the system office. But I do protest that kind of duplicitous behavior.
I
Speaking
think
of
it
emails.
went out very broadly. I think it went to everyone. But can we circle back to this issue in maybe new business? Because I know that Brendan, you had wondered where even the training that you're directed to, where that requirement was coming from and who's who. And I think it speaks a little bit to the fact that we can't track where anybody works anymore. Like there's just no, so it seems as if like a community college employee is instructing you to take a training on X, Y, and Z. So it's worth a little conversation, but can we move it to new business and wrap this item up? Okay.
I just brought it up pro forma.
Yeah. But it's worth a little chat, I think, for that reason. Back to John, do you think it's premature to maybe get together to draft a document and that you want more information, or should we put together a small committee to maybe get together in beginning of semester before our first meeting?
Yeah, maybe a committee that we could maybe meet before, the next meeting. I was, the hope was that I was going to be able to meet with Cardenas and then have more information to
Right.
sort of bring, and I'd like to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I'm not sure about timing.
Okay.
Now
Why
I'm
don't
open
we
to
say,
suggestions or
let's
what
try to scramble it together when, if you meet with him before that, then we can pull it together. If not, we'll defer to the next meeting.
sounds good. Thank you.
All right. And we'll by email, just kind of solicit interest in this. Does that sound good? Okay. All right. What is that, are we good to go on that item, you think? Okay, and oh, I just want to acknowledge that I echo your feelings on the forwarding of that email. It felt very, you know, felt very exposed. I'm like, how did that happen? So yeah, I hope we won't do that again. Okay, so item 7 is just a discussion of what should be included in the annual report to the legislature. And I guess the legislature and the board. So we have what we have presented so far from the study commission, which should be appended and referred to in whatever we send. But what are the major issues that need to be addressed?
Well, I think, you know, we've discussed most of them here, and we actually have resolutions on it. For the community college, it's the net effect of the consolidation and the tremendous debt load which has now been incurred, along with all the problems involved and the lack of teach out from the old community college programs to the new aligned ones, and the CPOS business, which I think we should explain it to some degree, to some detail, because it has definitely had a negative impact on students,
Yeah.
along with the question now of the tuition and fee increase.
Mhm.
I think those are probably the major issues, along with you know, our continued request for an agenda item on the Board of Regent meetings. I mean, I hate to sound like a broken bell or whatever on this, but I think that it's, you know, not an unreasonable request for a committee which is established by virtue of state statutes that it have a regular agenda item at Board of Regents meetings. So I think we need to come back on that. And I think we need to ask the question, and you know, we've asked this question in our previous report to the legislature, has the merger of the community colleges and universities as established in 2011 actually been successful? Have they, number one, issued their annual report on the distinct missions of the community colleges and the universities? The answer is no. Number two, have they respected the autonomy and integrity of the various constituent institutions? And the answer is no. And then we have to ask the question, have they respected the faculty control over curriculum, including its mode of presentation? And the answer is no. And so I think we need to give the appropriate details on all of those issues and write a fairly critical report. I mean, the last one that we wrote was critical. We made some suggestions for improvement, and we should sum that up. Brandon?
I think it's also worth mentioning that due to an arrangement with a contractor,
Yes.
students at Eastern, their tuition dollars are going to Florida.
Yes.
To who've created jobs in Florida as a consequence of what's happening.
Yeah. Agreed. Other items that in particular, I mean, it should come back to the January meeting of the FAC, I think.
Yeah, for approval. Can I forgot to mention something when we were talking about the community colleges. So I believe that this week, the CEOs of each campus submitted, I don't know what they're called, but maybe like requests to relinquish the accreditations, the individual accreditations of each of those colleges, prior colleges. So there's no fallback. Of course, the NETCHI accreditation is provisional. There should be a site visit. I think it's worth mentioning also that there was a huge discrepancy between, what is it, Lois? It's standard 9 is finance. Is that correct?
And I'm sorry, standard 9 is what?
Finances?
I
I
can,
don't remember, but whatever that standard is, there was an enormous discrepancy between the narrative that the system office was giving in public, in the newspapers at the time, and what was contained in that submission. So it kind of seems as if the sort of fallback, the safety net might be, I mean, this is something that you've been saying for a while, David, that we should at least make sure. Yeah.
Oh, and I forgot one thing,
Uh-huh.
CSU 2030. I think we need to give our learned opinion on that and the criticism of the OPM for its under budgeting for FY25.
Okay.
So we have, on the one hand, a unjustified overreach on the part of the system office, and on the other hand, a responsive, devastating underfunding from the OPM.
Mhm.
And I think we need to criticize both of them.
can I just say, Kalina, standard 7 is institutional
okay.
resources.
Gotcha. Brent,
Brendan, did you have more?
Yeah, I just want to circle back to essentially eliminating the accrediting of the individual community college campuses. And that's 12 accrediting. How many? Yeah.
yeah.
So that is public property, and it's valuable public property, right?
Mhm.
And it was paid for with taxpayer dollars, right? And the work of people on this Zoom, our colleagues across the state. I mean, these actually have monetary value, and I just don't understand how a handful of people, or maybe one person, has the authority to take state property and just tear it up and flush it, with no oversight, with no check-in with the General Assembly. I mean, and I'm sure there's estimates of how valuable these things are. So I would actually argue that we should point that out to the General Assembly, that the state of Connecticut has lost valuable property. Did the board vote to give up these?
That's a good question.
That's the
The
question.
resolution on the consummation of the one community college did not
That
mention
word.
it, nor did it mention changing in section 185 the term community and technical college system to CT State College.
Mhm.
So it's another example of a resolution coming from the system office somewhere, and which is inadequate. It's even to the purposes that they wanted. Right. So I think your point is well taken, Brendan, that there wasn't any authorization voted on by the board to do that.
I mean, there are rules and regulations, right, for disposal of state property.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm quite certain this does not follow that, at a minimum. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of problems with
Yeah.
that happening right now, in my opinion. So,
We will add that in. That's a good point. Good
And
to
I
ponder.
believe the argument might be run that a single accreditation, because of a single accreditation, it is implied that they must be relinquished, but we were never explicitly informed of that. And you've been saying at many board meetings, David, hold on to it. We've never been told that that was impossible or incompatible with single accreditation. So, Mary Beth and Andre.
Hi, sorry. I found
Go ahead.
We lost your audio for a second there, Mary Beth. Is it just me?
No.
Oh, I can't hear it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. So I'm just circling back to John's agenda item. I was furiously searching my email while we were talking about this, and I finally found it. So I will own up, I did forward the email. I forwarded it to one person on my campus who is the DEI chair of our committee on campus, because I'm not on that committee. And I
Mhm.
knew nothing about the questions that John was asking in the email. So I forwarded her the email and said, can you please let me know about your budget? What happened with your budget this year? Can you give me any background information? And I never heard back from her. And that's where it left. So I apologize for forwarding the email. I was really doing it. I was trying to help in the sense that I was trying to gather information that I did not know because you asked for insight from us and I didn't know. So I was forwarding it to her. I honestly don't know where it went from there. So I
Mary-
apologize if that is what happened.
Yeah, no, Mary Beth, that is a thank you for that, and it does kind of solve the mystery. And I was, because originally I was thinking, well, someone definitely just sent it right to Cardenas, and then I thought, well, maybe someone just forwarded it to a person who might know more about their campus. That totally makes sense, and I can see that was completely well intentioned. So thank you for that. I assume that was probably like, was that Bonnie Sullivan you sent it to?
I did.
This Nuntuck, yeah. So yeah, because he Cardenas included her in the CC back. And there are some other people in that CC, and I wasn't sure why they were there. So that solves the mystery.
It does, but it doesn't make us feel any better about that situation. So, I mean, obviously that was not my intent in forwarding it.
No,
so-
it does make me feel
That's
better though
me.
about this group. That it wasn't just someone from this group, like
Right. That's why I was
just
searching
trying to
my phone because-
undermine.
Right. That's why I was searching. I didn't want to say anything when we first started talking because I was like, I had like a vague memory of this situation, but like I wasn't sure. So I was just like searching through my emails and I found it. So, but for exactly that reason, I wanted to share that because
I so appreciate that.
it helps to know that nobody was doing it intentionally.
Yeah.
So sorry
That's
again.
great. No, thanks, Mary Beth. I appreciate it.
Yep.
That feels more like our group. Andre?
Yeah, well, first a comment. I like the word consummation. But I have a question. In terms of surrendering the accreditations, now there is accreditation that Francis had in its business programs that was independent, and as far as I could tell, that is probably not going to be able to be extended to the whole system. So is that going to be surrendered as well, or that's something different?
I mean, you would know better than me, but I thought there had been work done to do individual program. Lois, you clearly know.
Outside accredited programs are totally separate from this. It has nothing to do with, this is the accreditation of the school itself.
Okay.
Norwalk Community College, Tungus Community College, so forth, had independent accreditations through NECHI. That's what was relinquished.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And apparently in some cases, there are a greater number of specially accredited programs as a result because they're at more campuses.
Nursing, paralegal,
Yeah.
culinary arts, on and on. They're
Yeah.
out, other allied health programs. There are a lot of outside accredited programs.
Yeah. Mary Beth, that's not another hand, right? That's just a still.
Sorry. Yes. Putting it down right now.
All right. So I have on my list, there's the finances, including the CSU 2030, et cetera. There's tuition, there's an analysis of both Students First and the CSU system and their ability to achieve objectives. Transfer should be on the list of things you listed also.
Yeah.
David.
Transfer to tuition, yeah.
Yeah. Perhaps a conversation about CPOS as long as we can get clear on it. It's the problem exists at the Department of Ed. It's just how we're handling it and the discrepancies. Our agenda item, the creating jobs in Florida issue, BISC, OPM is part of our finances, and then this issue of the accreditations and just what the appropriate process is for relinquishing state property.
That'll give us plenty to do.
Loads. Loads.
But remember, on each of those items, it's a paragraph or two, because
Yeah.
we're not going into detail. We can do so perhaps in appendices or whatever. But anything more than 5 pages is not going to be looked at.
Yeah.
And it needs an executive summary of a couple of paragraphs at the beginning.
Right. And ideally, we have a summary and then we end up appending a good number of the documents that we've,
Yeah, resolutions
them.
and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah.
so we can just refer to those if we did them well enough. Carmen, course and program of study, that might be it. That's what I've been saying. I think that's what it is. But it's a federal financial aid guideline, I believe. Well, no. It is an Ellucian product that is created to enforce a federal financial aid guideline that pulls from the catalog by way of degree works and ensures that no course that doesn't directly contribute to your program of study is covered by federal financial aid, which is the financial aid guideline, the federal financial aid guideline. The question is only whether we took enough care with flexibility in our programs at the community college to have implemented this automated system. And then the extent of the workload to accommodate that automatic rejection when you consider that DegreeWorks reflects the programs of only about, I think, 8,000 of our students. The other 23,500 are legacy students whose programs are not in DegreeWorks. They're not in the catalog of the new college, and there was no teach out. So there's just no source of information that is appropriate. It's a massive workload as far as I can tell. And we are facing a possible workforce reduction of the very people who would work that, I would assume. That's the way I conceive of it. It's something I think the board needs to be aware of when they're considering, what we're going to do with this deficit, staffing, etc. So it is the discrepancy between the universities and colleges and just ideals of liberal arts education, I think, is kind of the FAC domain a little bit. And then the this issue of staffing to accommodate that and all the other transitional things.
I think for CPOS, it's the draconian interpretation that the people that CT State has taken on how to implement it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Shall we move on? Let's see, BOR agenda.
It's elections.
Elections. Okay. So we checked last time. Jen was wonderful in getting an email drafted that that needs to go out for the community colleges. I believe that universities are mostly on top of it. I owe Western, they wanted a blurb of the function of the FAC representative, or the job description kind of thing, which I think can be circulated. But all of our universities are now done except for Western, I believe. I believe Charter Oak's on top of it. The community college actually has enough folks to cover small, medium, large. It's just that we need to do the larger election and make sure that everybody is represented, because that's the aim. And I realized I did not inquire about SWOF, and SWOF isn't here today, so we have to make sure. So just a note, if you haven't had your election at your college yet, please make sure that we get it by the beginning of the semester, because that's when the new term needs to turn over. And we can have an election of, we need the voting members and then have an election for chair and vice chair. So.
Yeah, and may I add, as I've mentioned before, that my term expires at the end of this month. I declined to stand for re-election. I've done this now for 2 terms. I came to CCSU a little bit late in life at age 40, and I have been there going on 35 years. So you can do some calculations if you need. But time is advancing. And I think that it's appropriate that somebody else represent CCSU at the FAC. Mark Jackson, who was able to attend part of our meeting, but then had to go to chair his department meeting, is well informed of the workings of the institution. He's assumed responsibilities as a department chair in his own department, and also on an emergency basis in another department. I did promise him that he would not be expected to do anything more than attend meetings of the FAC. And so that means that also, when you consider co-chair for the universities in your election in January, you need to consider as well that that person should be the person going to the Finance Committee. And my own personal preference would be, since we have a number of economists among us, that it'd be an economist who goes there, because it is not fun to spend your time going through those spreadsheets that they give you. I was chair of our university budget and planning committee for a number of years back in the 2000s, but I have done only the best that a philosopher can do, pretending to be an economist. That's just my recommendation. I do hope that you accord me emeritus status, because I would like to attend your meetings subsequently, and I'll be here to assist in whatever way I can.
Mhm.
Can't you just stay,
John?
David?
What's that?
Can't you just stay?
Uh-huh.
I can attend, yes.
Yeah, but I feel no, don't go. This is really sad.
Uh-huh.
I vote for you to stay on doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
I vote. Sadly, I'm going to have to counter your vote and vote no on that.
Is consent part of it? Damn. Well, I'm seeing all the comments in the chat, expressing appreciation. I don't even know what to say, because we've been partners in crime for 4 years.
Yes, if I may reminisce for a second,
Life
at that-
change for me.
at that January meeting in 2020, right, when names were put forward for chair and vice chair, right, I had no idea who Kalina was, and when it was specified as well that she was a philosopher, I said, "Oh no, there's going to be 2 philosophers here." But it has worked out very well, and I have to say that Kalina has done more than an outstanding job, because she's also been responsible for relations with the legislature and the unions, and that's much more than I did, even when I was in the even years when I was chair. So that I'm very glad that she is going to continue, and that will give continuity, and I'll do what I can to assist.
Well, we don't know
Such
that
tasks
yet.
as might be appropriate for the white-haired individual that I have become. When I look at myself in Zoom at these meetings, I see sort of a ghost.
We don't. Well, look, thank you for that. We don't know yet. I will still be here, but I will say it's impossible to do any of this stuff like alone, right? Like this entire, I would have never taken this position if there wasn't going to be a group of like informed and experienced and just good, solid, intelligent people, in the group. And like, I've so appreciated doing this with you for 4 years, David, and just all the conversations. And we're supposed to be doing math without numbers. That's what you and me do. We've been doing, piled in these numbers. But yeah, no, I'm sad. I appreciate it.
I'm so
All
sad.
right.
I feel like crying. Oh,
We have been a family for a while. We've been through a lot.
I know. Well, David, you've done such a great job, and Kalina, obviously, I just think you guys are the best, which is why I try to keep coming back too. But I'm so thankful for you both.
Thank you, Jen. Same. Oh, and I have been reelected as Gateway's representative, so I will be staying on officially. Just, you'll be emeritus, David. I will be in the group for sure, and then we will see at the election next time whether, what happens. So yeah. Alrighty. Elections, is there any more to say about that? I like I said, I will try to get a sort of job description thing circulated because Western wanted it. Is there anything else? Okay, meeting dates. Pam put together a sort of draft BOR calendar that we can work from, and I know that Mark had at least looked at it and said that it looked like what he was expecting, so I hopefully it rings that way for all of us. I am not, let me see if I can. There we go. All right, I'm going to display it now. Here it is. And this is actually quite good. This has us on the 26th, where we can approve our report for the legislature, get straight on who's what in terms of who's been elected. Hoping that we can run the community college election electronically between the 26th and February 9th. And then on February 9th, we can most likely do elections for chair and vice chair. So we'll have like just a little trim there. Does everything else look good? Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve these as our dates? Okay. Anyone else? A second?
I'll second.
Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Okey doke. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Looking for the agenda. We were going to put something, hold on. Okay, yeah, so we would be at older new business, so this is the moment for the audit. Brendan, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to share some insights into an audit report that was completed recently by the Auditor of Public Accounts, which kind of works on behalf of the General Assembly. It's a bipartisan office, and they did an audit, I guess, a few years ago of Eastern, and revisited it apparently, and put out a report a couple of weeks ago about Eastern. So I just have a few slides because one or two things jumped out at me, and there's also some connection to the search for a new president. So I just thought I would share all of this information. So I didn't quite know what to how to describe this, but I think one theme, it seems like for our meeting, not only for this auditor's report though, is that the seams are showing. In other words, like, the fabric is pretty tight across a whole lot of different things, and it's not clear that everything's holding together at this point. Yeah, so as I mentioned, this was the auditor's report cover page for Eastern fiscal years ending June 2021, 2022. It's a 2-year audit, or I should say an audit of 2 years. And it's a little hard to go through sort of all the bureaucratic speak and figure out, which audit findings are sort of high profile and which are maybe, sort of understandable errors. But one thing that struck out to me was that the prior audit had 6 findings or flaws, and 4 of those were not fixed between the prior audit and the most recent one. And they've actually grown to 7 in total at this point, which is clearly the wrong direction in terms of running things appropriately. So that was one sort of top line finding that jumped out to me. But I was kind of floored at this part of things because it seems like our management in writing now has acknowledged that they do not have adequate resources to follow the rules on using resources. If you look here, so the auditor said sound internal controls require preparation of properly approved timesheets to provide assurance that the university only paid employees for hours they worked. And they had a group of part-time lecturers on non-teaching assignments who were paid something like $200,000, and the university did not have procedures to confirm that they actually did the work they were supposed to do because these were non-teaching assignments, I guess. The Eastern replied, the university agrees with this finding. Due to the pandemic and staffing shortages and turnover, we were unable to move forward with a new policy until fall 2022, but now there's policy guidelines in place. So, I mean, again, it's just kind of wild to me that we now have in writing that there's not enough staff to make sure we can follow the rules on making sure we spend the money appropriately. Now, my personal hope is that the next president will address these things and hopefully tighten up the ship and get things moving in the right direction. But there are concerns there as well. The BOR or the system office hired a search firm called Whitkeefer to conduct the search for the next president. There's a lot of upset on campus about how this is working. I have to tip my hat to Dave Stoloff for finding this bit of the sort of brochure for the position. It's a great picture Whitkeefer put in the brochure describing the job, except the problem is this is Windham, New York, like the state of New York, not Windham, Connecticut. So now the other thing the Board of Regents has decided in their wisdom is that there will apparently be no campus visits. So my hope is whoever they hire doesn't, compare this picture to the town they actually end up working in when they take the job. So obviously, and I don't know how much we're paying Whitkeefer to make these errors, but I could have done them for free. So anyway, that's one thing I'm concerned with. And then that's not the only error. You can learn more information about Windham, Connecticut by visiting ctvisit.com/city Danbury. So that's the other sort of flaw in Whitkeefer's presumably expensive search document. They're linking candidates to the wrong city in Connecticut and showing them pictures of a town in New York State. So in any event, that's pretty much it for what I wanted to remark. I think we've all sort of spoken at various points about how it's not clear we can continue to do more with less. And, I think that audit statement by the university that, we can't actually make sure we're enforcing the rules. We can't do what we need to do with the staff shortages we have is something we really need to take seriously, especially considering the fact that a lot of the remediation measures, involve even fewer people working on our campuses. So I'll stop there. I just wanted to share that with everybody. And thanks for your time.
Okay, anyone? That was interesting. I hadn't thought about the other end of that. When there were no campus visits, I was like, oh no, you guys aren't gonna know who it is. But the person will not have visited the campus. That's insane to take a job under those conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I there's actually a lot of upset about how the search is potentially being carried out. Apparently, the people who are supposedly involved in the search, the campus representatives, just haven't been contacted at all. The flawed brochure was issued fairly late in the cycle. Multiple other positions had been advertised in Connecticut by Whitkeefer months earlier. And yeah, there may be a fairly significant resolution coming out of Eastern Senate about flaws in the search. So, you know, and we have two more CSU presidential searches that will be done in the near future. So, I thought that was one reason why, you know, the group might want to hear about how it's going at Eastern.
Yeah, I think that's a significant because in the past, campus finalists for president did make a campus visit and moreover publicly address faculty and staff and administrators. And the fact that they are now modifying that, supposedly based on the fact that they didn't do that for the president of the CSCU search, is not a valid argument because the CSCU itself doesn't have any faculty, staff, or classes, but the institutions do. And so I think that's going to be an important part of our annual report to the legislature. And I think that we would certainly welcome a protest on the part of the Eastern Senate with respect to that, because that is really a bad policy. And it's over centralization and delocalization, which was a little theme that I developed at some point, but they're continuing.
Mhm.
So, you know, all that I've said in the past about a new leadership at the system office and new members of the board and so forth, but it's an old pattern of behavior that continues in terms of the resolutions that get presented, in terms of now the way in which they are dealing with the campus search for or the non-campus search for presidents, and I think we need to really highlight that.
Mhm. Yep. Okay. On to older new business. And I had just, okay, go ahead, Andre.
Well, this, I'm not sure what to make of this, but the forms for making proposing changes in curriculum actually are not accessible to faculty. One thing I found, and the thing is, the reason I'm talking about is because through all this consolidation, the prerequisites for economics were dropped and changed. Now they've gone through some miraculous changes, some that were actually involve procedure, but one thing is left open, and that is that there is no more any mathematics prerequisite for economics. And from my experience, that means that some students can't even do fractions. That's a real problem. I did put together a little proposal, and it was sent to this whatever it is, the SDC, and they came back with the idea that, well, we need to have a consensus among all the people that teach economics courses across the system. That'd be nice, except I can't get a list of them. And secondly, I'm not sure who they are. And thirdly, I'm not sure that that was supposed to be part of the process. I mean, they just added another part to a really complicated and convoluted process. So, I mean, what the hell one's supposed to do? Because as far as I'm concerned, it's a ridiculous thing. And I don't know. I'm not sure what to do about it. I mean, basically, I've sort of given up and said, the hell with it. Why should I be wasting my time if nobody gives a shit? Whatever. So that's just a question. Is that something that we should at some point consider or not?
Consider, I mean, if that's correct, and I mean, does anybody else, any other faculty want to, community college faculty, talk about the accessibility of these forms? Carmen?
Yeah, I don't know about accessibility. I think the forms should be easy to get, but what Andre was saying is, because we had something similar with science, and someone wanted to try to change some of the course, the prerequisites and some of the course outcomes for microbiology. They'd spoken to maybe 4 or 5 different colleges, but then when they got to SDC, they're like, well, you need to get more people on board, you know, so it is a little bit crazy. And there is a huge problem with, now we have physics classes that are being offered with no math prerequisites. So in biology and chemistry, so it's like a huge problem. And I don't even know where to start, because the problem is that every student who comes into the system doesn't have to take a developmental course, so they're automatically allowed to take a college level math course. And these courses like economics, Chem 1, Physics 1 are also to be taken first semester. So it's a big problem. Yeah, Andre, you're not the only one. This is all around, all over. So,
Hmm.
but as far as the forums, that shouldn't be a problem. It's just more of like how many people have to be on board before you present something to the SDC, which then can be approved to go back to the departments to approve it or not. And this is, so we're finding the same thing in other areas.
I think they got the process backwards, okay? The SDC is supposed to accept proposals and then send them out to local institutions and everybody else, okay? They're not supposed to wait for me to go organize what a confab of all the people that ever heard of economics in the goddamn system. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. That's true.
Can I ask
So,
a
I
question?
mean,
What
yeah,
are
go ahead.
the 6 deans that they hired for the what they call the school of
That's
the
it.
various areas? What are they doing?
The ones that dealing over business and hospitality, which is where economics is now. Well, I shouldn't say anything.
Okay, enough said.
I mean, that does seem like something that should make its way to the community college's curriculum and Senate first, right? Yeah. Go ahead. So I guess what you're saying is that the governance process doesn't work in the first place. So how much faith do we have in that? But we will see. Lois, go ahead. I can hear you.
Sorry, I didn't forget I was muted. Didn't Jen Long say that her school dean spent his time going to campus, attending poetry readings and art exhibitions so he could support faculty? That was his job?
We have also heard it's not clear what the job description is from people who should know what the job description is.
Like the people who have the jobs?
Something like that.
Now, they're what are they called? School deans? What is their title?
I can't keep track of that
Period?
stuff. I don't know.
Deans of
Area? I don't know. Yeah, I don't remember.
I can't remember the terminology.
They're deans of
Whether
different,
those 6
different
areas were
schools.
called schools.
Yes,
Dean's
that's
in
right.
search of a job.
Okay, so we'll include that in our annual report because we have to also talk about the rather unfortunate end of the regional presidents
Yeah.
at a
Well,
cost of $3.7 million.
I think this, yes, and I think this maybe speaks to the thing that I was saying, let's get back to. I think Brendan's not here right now, but you know, that question, right? Like when we try to figure out whether it's on our institutional website, CSCU website, open payroll, this anywhere, who works for who, where they get paid, etc. It's almost impossible. And that resulted in, I forget what it was, Brendan trying to figure out why someone at a community college was assigning him a training for something else, right? And there is a lack of clarity there, and a need for that clarity, but it's because not only is there no reliable org chart, the org chart that I guess exists at the community college is one that never went through an appropriate process, but also we don't know what it is at the moment, right? And we don't know where it's going. I think it might be in flux. So it's sort of on the same, or part of this conversation, sort of on the same thing as Brendan, I was mentioning our inability to know who this person was, right? And who they worked for. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the I'm sorry, let me get the intent. The CSCU Information Security Program Office. These are required information security awareness training emails. And it looks like the signature has changed. Yeah, they used to be signed by somebody who I believe worked for the community college system office. I think in open payroll. I didn't recognize the name, so I was trying to figure out who this was coming from. But now it seems to be coming from unsigned, no person. So, but But yeah, I mean, it's a little unclear why or how ISU faculty should be doing work assigned to them by a community college administrator. It seems fairly unprecedented, but I don't know. I could be wrong.
Yeah. And I think we've noted that open payroll information is, it couldn't possibly be, well, yeah, it wouldn't make no sense because of the high number of people who supposedly work for the system office, right? Like, what was the number that we found?
Something like
Some
500.
enormous number, yeah. Okay,
Yeah, that'll all come, I'm gonna mention that all in my presentation to the board on, on the question of, where is the money gone?
yeah. Yeah. Because once all of this mitigation is done, et cetera, there will be no, unless this is fixed, there'll be no real transparency about what our actual staffing levels are, who is where, et cetera. Or at least it, you should be able to get that through that avenue. Though I will say that the CT state presentation was pretty thorough, and hopefully will remain that way. Anything else, old and new? And Andre, is that's a hand?
I'm sorry.
Okay. Anything else on old and new business?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. I'll stop the recording now.